As I keep getting interrupted by announcements, I'm just going to explain some of my workings again here. So I had two negatives here, which made me a plus, and then instead of adding 4 to both sides, I just simply subtracted 4 from both sides. Question 13, where it says subtract 8, I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and then I'm just going to simplify. And on this question here, the opposite of times it by -1/4 is to divide by -1/4. If you have a fraction button on your calculator, you could do that straight away. If not, just work out 1 divided by 4 on your calculator, so it will be -0.25, and then go ahead and divide. Now, as I divided by a negative number, notice that I flipped my inequality over. Now, for 15, you can divide both sides by 2/3 if you have a calculator. If not, you can do it in 2 steps, which is what I'm going to do here. So instead of dividing by 3, I'm going to times both sides by 3. This cancels, and then it leaves me 2t is less than, if I work this out, I get -72. Now, if I want just t by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So t is less than -36. Now, a lot of people mix up one of the rules at this stage, and they remember multiplying and dividing by a negative number flips the inequality. So they can see that I divided here, and they see the negative, and they think it's time to flip. Notice what the opposite I did though here was just to divide by 2. So the fact that this number is negative is not important. It's the number that goes with the variable that's important. So if I have a negative variable, when I divide, I should flip the inequality. Also, I'm just solving each inequality right now, and I'm going to come back and graph it on a number line in a second. I got -5w, so I'm going to divide both sides by -5. This is definitely one where I'm going to want to flip the inequality, because I just divided by a negative number. Now, we don't want to leave the variable on the right-hand side though, so actually I'm going to flip the inequality back again using the symmetric property. So although originally it said greater than, I'm going to change it to less than because I flipped these two things over. The other way you can remember that is look that the arrow is pointing towards the W. So when I flip the two symbols over, make sure that the inequality is still pointing to the W. Now I'm going to draw very short number lines for these questions, and I'm just going to put 3 numbers on them, so 4, 5 and 6. So key attributes for this one, with there being no equal sign here, I'm going to have an open circle, and then as this points to the right, I'm going to just draw a line that goes to the right. Now you can also draw this actually on the number line, but I think that makes it a little difficult to see, so I always tend to do it just a little bit above the number line. 11, so I'm going to need 10, 11 and 12. This time it is equal to, so I'm going to do a closed circle. It points to the left, so notice my arrowhead also points to the left. -24, so I'm going to need -24, -23, -25. Open circle, because there's no equal sign, as it points to the left, I'm going to go ahead and draw that to the left as well. I think that covers all the possible cases. This one's also less than, just like this one is, and I already did an example of less than or equal to for graphing as well. Now, if we move on to multi-step inequalities, same sort of idea. I'm going to collect all my letters on the left because I think that's a little easier to do. So I've got -2h minus 6 is less than -20. Make sure you pick up the sign here as well. It's not just 20. As it says subtract 20, that means it's going to be -20. Now when we start moving the numbers across to the side, instead of subtracting 6, I'm going to go ahead and add 6, so this cancels. And I get -2h is less than -20 plus 6 is -14. And then on my last step, I'm going to divide both sides by -2. So that cancels, but as I just divided by a negative number, that's going to flip the inequality back over. And -14 divided by -2 is +7. So my answer is h is greater than 7. For question 18, instead of dividing by 5, I'm going to do the opposite, which is to multiply by 5 on both sides. So -4 times 5 is -20. Notice I'm not flipping the inequality, even though this was negative and I multiplied, because I just did the opposite of multiplying by dividing by 5. So I didn't multiply by a negative number there. Add 2 to both sides. Give me -18, and then divide both sides by 4. And that should cancel, and I should get -9/2, dividing both of those two numbers by 2, or -4.5 if you prefer. Now we had a similar question to this for equations, so we need to know that we're going to move the number across first, and we're going to do the opposite, divided by 7 second. So instead of adding 1, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Negative 5 take away 1 is negative 6. And instead of dividing by 7, I'm going to times both sides by 7. So t is greater than negative 42. So once again, notice although there was a negative here, that's not important. It's the fact that I multiplied both sides by 7, which is positive, which is why I didn't flip the inequality. Now our last section is literal equations, which probably causes the most problems, because there's actually less to work out and there's more variables involved. So solve for the given variable. Solve for x means your answer has to look like x equals. At the moment it says 9 equals, so technically I solve for 9. Now before we do this question, I'm going to do a much simpler question. And now we're going to try and link this together. So if I gave this equation, you would know to bring the 2 across to the other side, because I want to leave the x by itself. So subtract 2 from both sides, this cancels. And then I just work out 9 take away 2, which is 7. And then instead of times it by 3, I would divide by 3, and that would actually be my answer. X equals 7 over 3. Now I'm going to move that down and go back to this question, and I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I want to move this to the other side because it's nothing to do with my x, so I'm going to subtract 2y from both sides. Now that will cancel on this side, and I'll get left with 3x. And the main difference between this question and this question is 9 take away 2 is just a number problem which I can work out. 9 take away 2y, I can't actually simplify, because one is a number and one is a variable, so I can't collect those together because they're not like terms. So all I can say is 9 take away 2y. Now if I know 3x, 3 times x, if I do the opposite of times in by 3, that's to divide by 3. Once again, I can't simplify this at all because I got variables with numbers. I could say possibly 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then I could just say this is 2y divided by 3. But I don't think that improves the question any at all, so I would just leave it like that. Now the question actually says x equals, I have gone ahead and solved for x as it actually asked me to do. On 21, I'm going to try and solve for n, so anything that's not an n I want to move to the other side, so negative 5n, I'm going to move across and do positive 5n, so this cancels. I got positive 9n, or just 9n. And 15 plus 5n, there's not a lot I can do with that, so I'm just going to leave it as 15 plus 5n. If I know 9n, I can find n by itself just by dividing by 9, and I've actually answered that question there. That's all I can do for this question. I could split it into 2 possibly, and say it's 15 over 9 plus 5m over 9, and 15 over 9 is the same as, they both divide by 3, so 5/3 plus 5/9 m. But I don't think that necessarily makes my answer any easier, so I'm going to leave it like this. My last question, I'm going to solve for x, but unusually on this question I actually have 2 terms that have x in it, so I need to collect those terms together first before I can start solving. So instead of adding 2x, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So I got 3x, still have negative 4y, and it equals w. Now I'm going to move this to the side because I'm trying to get the x by itself. So instead of subtracting 4y, I'm going to add 4y to both sides. So that cancels, and I got 3x equals w plus 4y, which I can't collect together because these aren't the same variable. One is w and one is y. And then instead of timesing by 3, I'm going to divide by 3. So x equals w plus 4y over 3. And there's not a lot that I can actually do with that. So that concludes the test review. Make sure you study those questions carefully, so when it comes time to doing the Unit 2 test, you should be well prepared.